And Owen was explaining, that Israel had a problem in dealing with events like Durban because, as he was explaining, Israel has mechanisms, or this is 9 years ago, had mechanisms for dealing with government, but none for dealing with NGOs, non-governmental organizations, and had failed to understand how powerful an influence NGOs have, especially on the United Nations. And of course, they were key to the Durban event. And so Israel found itself isolated. And the ambassador, attempting to cheer us up, and he's a good man, and he meant nothing wrong, it was a beautiful thing of him to say, but he said, "'Twas ever thus. We are levadad yishkon, the people that dwells alone." And that, of course, was his definition of Jewish destiny, those famous words taken from the book of Numbers, "We are the people that dwells alone." And that was his view. And I have heard that many, many times recently. In fact, on my way here, I was reading a provincial Jewish newspaper from the 4th of June, from this Friday, and an editorial talking about a front page article on how isolated Israel is. And the article ends, "This brings to mind those famous words, the people that dwells alone." And it was at that moment that a light exploded in my brain. And I said, "Kvod Ashegria, what makes you think those words are a blessing? Maybe they are a curse." First of all, remember who said them. The prophet Bilam, who was not entirely a friend of the Jews. Second of all, remember what the Talmud in Tractate Sanhedrin says about precisely that passage. Kol habrachot shebirchan Bilam nefchu liklalot. Every single blessing that Bilam gave the Jewish people eventually turned into a curse, with the one exception of his blessing, Matovu ohalecha Yaakov mishkanotecha Yisrael. As the Talmud says, this refers to shuls and houses of study, but without exception, they all turned into curses. And I said, think finally of the word levad or levadad. Is that a good thing to be in biblical terms? You remember God creates the world and 7 times pronounces it good. Vayar Elokim ki tov. What is the first occasion the words not good appear in the Bible? Lo tov heyot ha'adam levado. It is not good for man to be alone. Secondly, what does it say about, we should know such things, about a leper, a mitzorah, badad, yeshev, michutz lamachane moshavo. He shall dwell alone outside the camp. Most famously of all, on the saddest day of the year, we read the saddest book of the Bible, Sefer Eicha, the book of Lamentations. And how does it begin? Eicha yashva vadad ha'ir rabatiyam. How does the city once so full of people dwell solitary? Except when the word badad is used of God, by and large in the Bible, the word badad is a symbol of a curse, not a blessing. And that was when I said to him, and it is the core argument of future tense, that if you define yourself as a people that dwells alone, there is every danger that you may find that you have become a people that dwells alone. And that is not a good way to solve the problems the Jewish people is currently facing. So let me relate that very briefly and very simply to 2 major challenges that we are facing as a Jewish people: anti-Semitism and Jewish continuity. Number 1, anti-Semitism. We are going through what has emerged in recent years as what I would call a new strain of anti-Semitism. What is anti-Semitism if you try and define it? Every time you try and define it, you result in a series of contradictions. In the 19th century, Jews were hated because they were capitalists and because they were communist, because they were rich, because they were poor, because they kept to themselves, and because they infiltrated everywhere. Because, said Voltaire, there are superstitious people with a primitive religious faith. Because, said Lenin, they are rootless cosmopolitans who believe nothing. Wherever you look, you find yourself faced with a contradiction. And therefore, I argue the only way really to understand anti-Semitism is to see it as a virus. Now, the body has this most sophisticated of all mechanisms called the immune system. And the immune system is very good at dealing with viruses. So how does the virus beat the immune system? And the answer is by mutating. And that is how anti-Semitism always defeats every attempt to end it. It mutates. And there have been, in broad terms, 3 mutations in the last 2,000 years, and we are living through the 4th. What do I mean? Number 1, if you look at histories of anti-Semitism, you will see that they begin with the Hellenistic period, with the Greeks and the Romans, many of whom had quite negative things to say about Jews. Now, I don't see that as anti-Semitism at all, because in fact, the Greeks especially tended to say that about anyone who wasn't Greek. They regarded them as mere a flock of sheep, so they called them barbarians. That's the sound that sheep make. If you're not Greek, you're a barbarian. So they said not nice things about Jews, but they said that about everyone. It was like when the mafia shoot you in The Godfather Part 2. And just before you sleep with the fishes, is that what they call it? They say, nothing personal, strictly business. So that anti-Judaic sentiment you find in a number of Greek and Roman writers, nothing personal. I don't call that anti-Semitism at all. I call that xenophobia, which is different. When does it become personal? And the short answer is that happens pretty soon into the 2nd generation of Christianity. All of a sudden, Jews were the people who didn't accept their own Messiah. Being a Jewish Messiah is nishkin tachlis, I have to tell you, And a friend of mine who's a wonderful literary guy in Washington is writing a book on how come Jews never accept the Messiah, when the answer to the question, has the Messiah come, is always not yet. And he's writing this brilliant book because whenever his publisher says, is the manuscript ready, he replies, not yet. So, so with the birth of Christianity, suddenly a theological anti-Judaism appears that you will find already in the Gospels, getting progressively worse from Matthew to Luke and then to John. And you find it in the church fathers, Chrysostom especially, and you begin to get what is known as the adversos Judaeos literature of the church fathers, virulently anti-Semitic in the late 1st, 2nd, 3rd centuries. So that is mutation 1. Mutation 2, difficult to give it a date, but let's fix on 1096, when on their way to liberate Jerusalem, the Crusaders stop at Wormspire and Mainz and massacre Jewish communities in the north of Europe. And all of a sudden, the Christian anti-Judaism becomes a kind of demonic anti-Judaism. Jews are no longer merely the people who reject Christianity. They become the people who spread the plague, who poison wells, who desecrate the host, who kill Christian children to use their blood to make matzahs. All of a sudden, they become Satan, the Antichrist, the agents of evil in some mysterious way. And that